everybody, welcome to Your Move. I'm Andy Stanley. Did you know that pride is a prison? It locks you in and it locks other people out. But today, I'm going to help you get out and stay out right here on Your Move. This is a series about killing that thing in us that has the potential to kill us and everything good around us. This is a series about killing or learning to kill that thing in us that has the potential to kill us and everything around us. We're talking about dealing with our pride. And not the pride that makes us proud of our kids or proud of our companies or proud of our accomplishments or the pride that inspires people to greatness. So in this series, we're talking about calling out our pride before it shuts God and others out. Just naming it, saying pride, that's pride, that's pride, that's pride. I recognize my pride. Pride is not going to hold the remote control of my life. I'm taking the remote back from pride. Pride, I'm killing it. I'm getting rid of you. You are not going to control my life anymore. Now, today I want to talk to a very, very specific group of you. And specifically, I want to talk to what I'm going to call the 3P people. The 3P people. 3P people have these three characteristics. You have a measure of power, a measure of prestige, and you've got some stuff. In fact, you've got some more stuff than the average person. You have extra stuff. You're known for your stuff. Okay? By power, I mean that when you walk in the room, people pay attention because you're the boss. You write the paychecks. You set the bonuses. You know, you're kind of large and in charge of your environment. You've got a measure of power. People are a little bit careful around you because after all, you've got the power. Prestige, this can come from a variety of sources. You may not be the richest person in the room, but you're the smartest person in the room. All eyes turn to you when there's a decision to be made. You've accomplished something great. You're related to somebody great. You just kind of carry a little bit more weight than the average person. And possessions, you're just resourced. You're resourced because you worked hard and you earned it. You're resourced because you just happen to be born to the right family. Everybody thinks you're funnier than you really are because you have more money, okay? So here's the thing. If you are a 3P person, you have unique challenges when it comes to this issue of pride. And denying that you're a 3P person is not humility. It's deception, okay? It's not humility. It's really dishonesty. And here's the deal. If you deny that you are a 3P person, it actually sets you up to misuse your stuff. It actually sets you up to misuse the 3Ps, and you will misusing it wisely. So the best thing you can do is acknowledge, you know what? I'm a 3P person. I got a little more power. I got a little bit more prestige, and I have, more resources than the average person. So I'm set up to be gobbled up by my pride. So I need to pay attention. So today's message is specifically for all the 3P people. Now, if you're not a 3P person, you're thinking, well, this isn't for me. I just want you to hang on for a second, and then we'll get to the story. Because here's the deal. If you would consider yourself a non-3P person, I want you to know there are over 3 billion people in the world. And I want you to look at that number. A billion is a lot more than a million, right? We throw these numbers around. There are over 3 billion people in the world that if they were to drop into your life, they would swear you are a 3P person. These are the people that live on $2.25 a day. And if they were to drop into your world and you would say, oh, no, I don't have much power. And they would look at you and say, are you kidding? You have so many choices I will never have the opportunity to make. So this is actually a message for all of us. Because in some context, we are all set up by what we have, who we know, what we can do, where we have the option to go that sets us up for this pride to grab the remote and shut us in, shut God and others out. So today I'm going to tell you a really fascinating story from the Old Testament. This is not a Bible story. This is something that happened that someone wrote down and included in the Jewish Bible that then got sandwiched and added on to the Christian Bible. So this is a fascinating piece of history. I'll try to make it as interesting as I can, but in it is buried this powerful idea. And this is a story about King Nebuchadnezzar. He was the king of Babylon. This story, will give you a little context. In about 605 BC, 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar's army went to Jerusalem, almost destroyed the city, took the southern half, basically conquered the southern half of the kingdom of Israel. It was divided at that point, northern and southern kingdom. And they took a lot of things of value. And one of the things they took were the best and the brightest young men, because Nebuchadnezzar was smart. And he would go into a city or a kingdom, and he would take the best and brightest, bring them to Babylon, teach them to walk and talk like a Babylonian. So when he went to Jerusalem, he did this, and he carted off 4 very, very famous people. And if you grew up in church or grew up around Bible teaching, you've heard of these guys. One was Daniel, and the other 3 we always hear about together, Shadrach, Meshach, and... Look at you guys, all these Bible scholars. Yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So when they get to Babylon, and they kind of get into the whole system, and they're getting this Babylonian education, at one point Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And he thinks it's an important dream, and he calls in the interpreters of dreams, all the magicians and all the wise people. And he says, hey, I've had this dream, and I want you to tell me what it means, but I'm not even going to tell you what the dream is, because I know you guys. You guys just make this stuff up. So if you're really wise and you're really in touch with the gods, you should be able to tell me what my dream was and what it means. And all of his smart guys go, oh my gosh, Nebuchadnezzar, only the gods could reveal to someone the dream you had. You at least have to tell us the dream. So he's about to put them all to death. Daniel shows up and says, time out, give me a day, I'll be back and I can tell you what your dream is. And sure enough, this Jewish kid tells Nebuchadnezzar what his dream was and what it means. And Nebuchadnezzar says, oh my goodness, from now on, we're all going to worship the Jewish God, because Daniel's God is the God of gods. A few years go by. Nebuchadnezzar forgets his lesson. He decides, hey, we're all going to bow down and worship an idol that represents my authority. You're going to swear ultimate allegiance to me. He sets up this big idol, this big statue out on the plain of Dura outside the city of Babylon. And he says, everybody's going to bow. Daniel is on vacation somewhere. He doesn't know about this, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are in the city, and they send a message to the king, and they let it be known, we're not going to bow to your idol. We're not going to bow to your idol. Oh, no, we're not. And so they take Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they heat up the furnace. Remember this? Put those 3 guys in there, and they won't burn. And Nebuchadnezzar's like, bring them out. New rule, whoever they worship, we worship. The God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he's thinking, I think I remember learning this lesson a long time ago with the Dan guy. So anyway, Nebuchadnezzar has an on-again, off-again faith in God. But when you're basically the emperor of the world, the king of the world, because the Babylonians control that part of the world, and from their perspective, the entire world, you're surrounded by sycophants. You're surrounded by people that say, you are the greatest. You are like a god. So about 25 years after all that, in about 580 BC, Nebuchadnezzar has another dream. And here's how the story starts. Nebuchadnezzar, he journals this, and Daniel gets a hold of this, and it becomes part of the Old Testament Jewish book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar was at home in my palace. He's a 2P person. I was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous, 2P person. I had a dream that made me afraid. And in his dream, he dreamed of this giant tree. It was so large that everyone in the world could see it. And it was this beautiful, beautiful tree. And then there was a voice in his dream that said, cut it down, cut it down, cut it down. And suddenly this tree is cut down, and all that's left is a stump. And then after the tree is cut down in the dream, he hears a voice in his dream. He calls them messengers, or perhaps angels. And the messengers or the angels announce in his dream, the decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare, now this is all in his dream, the holy ones declare the verdict, so that the living may know that. And now this is your part, because this is the part we're going to all read together. So let me make sure you have the context. He's having a dream. In the dream, a tree is cut down. In the dream, suddenly he hears these voices saying the following. And here's what the voices say. Let's all say it together. Ready? The Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of people. So he tells this dream to Daniel, and Daniel's face goes white. And Nebuchadnezzar says, what's wrong? And Daniel can't even speak. Nebuchadnezzar says, come on. And Nebuchadnezzar begins to encourage Daniel. Come on, Daniel, it can't be that bad. After all, I'm King Nebuchadnezzar. What could possibly go wrong? And Daniel says to King Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, if only this dream were about your enemies, but it's about you. You are the tree in your dream. And this is the interpretation, he says. This is the interpretation, your majesty. And this is the decree the Most High has issued against you, my Lord King. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched in the dew of heaven. And King Nebuchadnezzar says, metaphorically, right? Daniel says, no, literally. And then he says 7 times will pass by, and 7 times is a period of time we don't know. 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, 7 years, probably 7 years. 7 times will pass by you until you acknowledge that together the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. In other words, King Nebuchadnezzar, this is going to be your lot in life until you recognize once and for all that you are a king. You are not the king. 7 times will pass by. The story continues. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots. In other words, he said, remember in your dream, the stump was left. They didn't grind up the stump. Means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge, and I love this phrase. It only appears one time in all of the Bible, and I love this phrase. When you acknowledge, O king, that heaven rules. Heaven rules. Heaven rules. And so Daniel says to the most powerful person on the planet, you must repent of your sin and you must repent of your injustice. And if you do, perhaps God will relent and perhaps this horrible thing that you've dreamed about will not come to pass. 12 months later, a year goes by. An entire year goes by. 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, and this is when the soundtrack changes. Now here he is. He's the most powerful person in the room every time he walks into a room. And he says either out loud or to himself, is this not the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? And if this was a film, if this was a movie, this is at the point where the audience would be like, no, you didn't just say that. And Daniel says that even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven and said, this is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. You are a king, you are not the king. So something can be decreed in spite of your decrees. Your royal authority has been taken from you. Your royal authority has been taken from you. That means somebody gave it to you. It was a stewardship. It's temporary. And oh, King Nebuchadnezzar, whether you understood it or not, you are accountable. You will be driven away, just as Daniel said, from the people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. And immediately, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. And he was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. It goes on to give us even more description. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven. He lived outside until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. Now, when you read that, you think that's kind of freaky. But did you know there's actually a mental condition? In fact, there's a name for it. You can look this up on Wikipedia, where we get all the facts of all the true things. It's called boanthropy. Okay, and boanthropy is a person is in a delusional state of belief. They believe himself or herself to be an ox or a cow and attempts to live and behave accordingly. And that's what happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. But it was prophesied that it would only last for a time, 7 times. So at the end, again, Nebuchadnezzar is telling us the story. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven and my sanity was restored. And then I praised the Most High. I bet he did. Here's what he said. He said, I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom, not my kingdom, not the kingdom of the Babylonians. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. What an amazing story. The most powerful man on the planet is humbled by the king of kings because heaven rules. Now, 40 years go by. 40 years go by. King Nebuchadnezzar dies. The Babylonian influence in that part of the world begins to wane. The new big dog on the block is the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great. And in the city of Babylon, Belshazzar was ruling the city. Nabonidus, his father, who was King Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law, is also a leader, but he's leading the army. And he's at war with the Persians. Meanwhile, Belshazzar is leading and in control of the city. Nabonidus is defeated time after time after time by the Persians. He eventually surrenders the army and flees to the hills, and the Persian army under Cyrus the Great surrounds the city of Babylon. Belshazzar, who is now in charge of the entire nation, he doesn't know what's happened to Nabonidus. All he knows is that the city of Babylon is surrounded by the Persians, that Cyrus the Great has come for the city. But Belshazzar believed that the city was impregnable, that they would never get over the walls, through the walls, or under the walls. And so in his arrogance, he throws a banquet on the very night that the city has finally been surrounded and they are cut off from all help from any source. He throws a party and he dedicates the party to Marduk. Marduk was the Babylonian god. And here's what he did. It's very fascinating. Anytime he conquered a city, anytime he conquered a nation, he would take the idol that represented that city or nation's god, bring it to Babylon, and make it part of his god collection. At this party, Belshazzar brings out the statue of Marduk, sets it in the middle of the banquet hall, and then has his people bring out all these statues and idols that represent all the other gods of the conquered nations, put them around or in a semicircle around Marduk as a reflection of the fact that our God Marduk can protect us from any nation and from any city. The challenge was this. When Nebuchadnezzar, many, many years before this, went into the city of Jerusalem, he went into the temple to find the idol that the Jews worship, the representation of the Jewish God. But what did he find? No idol, because the Jews didn't worship an idol. So they did the next best thing. They stole what they could from the temple as a reflection of the fact that they had conquered the nation and conquered the Jewish God, and they put them in there among the idols that they had stolen from all these other cities and nations. So when Belshazzar has his banquet to just revel in the fact that he is a king and they'll never take the city, he brings out the golden and silver goblets that had been stolen from the Jewish temple as a reflection of the fact that the Jewish God is out of business. And he begins to use those goblets in his party. And right in the middle of the party, they look up on the wall and the plaster is falling off the wall. And as they pay closer attention, it's as if a finger is writing letters in the plaster on the wall, and the music stops and the party stops and all the drinks go down. And the Old Testament, the book of Daniel tells us that Belshazzar was so afraid that his knees gave way. And he called for his magicians because nobody could read what was being written in the plaster on the walls of the banquet hall. And then Belshazzar's wife remembered Daniel. And she sent for Daniel. And Daniel, by this time, is probably in his 70s. He has spent his entire life from the time he was a teenager till he's 70 years old. And he worked under Nebuchadnezzar. He's been a part of the kingdom, a part of the court all these years. They bring him in. He's an older man now. And he looks up at the walls. And he looks at Belshazzar and all his arrogance, and yet with all of his fear. And here's what happens next. You should read your Bible. This is unbelievable stuff, isn't it? Here's what happens. Then Daniel answered the king, "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. Your Majesty," he says, "the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar," actually his grandfather, but they use those terms interchangeably, "gave your father, your grandfather Nebuchadnezzar, sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. But when Nebuchadnezzar's heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory, until he acknowledged that," all together, "the Most High God is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and sets over them anyone he wishes. Belshazzar, your grandfather, who was a great king, understood that his power was on loan from the King of Kings. But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this. In other words, this story about Nebuchadnezzar had circulated. It was common knowledge. This was a story his grandchildren knew. You knew all of this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had, this was the big offense, you had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines drank from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. No offense, Marduk. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life in all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. And you could have heard a pin drop. This is the inscription, Daniel says. This is the inscription that was written. And he reads these words, many, many tekel parson. Here is what these words mean. Many. God has numbered your days. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought them to an end. O King Belshazzar, your days are numbered. You see, for me, maybe it's just me, we're all different. This is enough to take all the wind out of all of our sails when we get too big for our britches. When I'm around people who just seem to be so full of themselves, I just want to walk up and politely say, and I never do because it would be a terrible thing to say, I just want to stop the meeting or stop the show or stop and walk up and say, look, do you know you're going to die? You do realize that. And this is the moment for Belshazzar. And all his pomp and all of his glory and all the attention he's getting from the people he has surrounded himself with. Your days are numbered. Second word. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. You're accountable. Someone else has weighed you. Someone else has judged you. Someone else is holding you accountable. You hold all the people under you accountable. There's someone greater than you that holds you accountable, and now you must give an account. The last word, Perez. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Belshazzar, your influence is temporary. Now here's the most fascinating part of the story to me. A week or so before, the Persians under Cyrus the Great, they didn't call him great for nothing, okay? Went about a mile or two up the Euphrates River and redirected the river into a swamp. The Euphrates River ran right through a portion of Babylon. It's where they got their water. It went under the wall. They built the wall over the river on two sides. They redirected the river, and for the past few days, the level of the river had dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. And King Cyrus and Cyrus the Great timed it perfectly so that as the sun set, the Euphrates River began to dip below the lowest point in the walls of Babylon. And as they're having this party, and as Daniel is making this proclamation, the Persian army is slipping into the city of Babylon. It was taken that night, and that night, Belshazzar was executed. Because the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. Wow. You know what it means? It means for those of us as 3P people, you know, whether you're a 3P person in the United States or Canada or South Africa, it means that every single day we need to remember that it is a stewardship. No matter what you have, how much power, how much prestige, how many possessions, it's a stewardship. That means there are so many variables that you have no control over, that you should never ever, and I should never ever get all puffed up and arrogant over any of that. It has been placed in our hands. We are managing something we did not create and we will not hold on to forever because it's temporary. It's all temporary. And maybe the most important one of all, and the thing that we forget when things are going on, when we've got it going on, is that we're accountable. We're accountable. We're accountable. That one day we give an account of how we managed our prestige and our power and our possessions. And you know how we know that we're accountable? Let me read it to you this time. Because the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. So here's what this means to you tomorrow. Here's what this means for you this afternoon. It means that when you're sitting at the end of the table and you're like the person, you're the woman in the room, you're the guy in the room, all eyes turned to you, you're at the end of the table, you know. It means when you can call a meeting and whoever you call comes because you're in charge, you're the director, you're the division leader, you're the owner, you're the boss, you run this, you know, you're the guy, you're the woman. You get that raise, you get that promotion, you win that award, you're recognized for. It means in that moment when your pride rises up and starts to reach for the remote control because now we are somebody, you snatch that remote and you say, no pride, no pride, no pride, no pride. It's a stewardship. It's temporary. I'm accountable because pride, were you not there for the sermon? The Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and he gives them to anyone he wishes. So I'm going to be grateful, but I'm not going to be arrogant. Do you know what else it means? It means that when you see someone with less than you, more importantly for many of us, when you're with people who are less sophisticated, less educated, less intellectual, that's when you take that remote and say, no pride, no pride, no pride. It's a stewardship. It's temporary, and I'm accountable. Because pride, I don't know if you were there for the message or not, but the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. So pride, you just go back to wherever you came from because this is not your deal. The Most High is sovereign over all things. It was a stewardship. It's temporary. And I know I'm accountable. That's how those of us who are 3P people somewhere to someone manage and deal with our pride. That's how at the end of the day you kill it. You put it where it needs to be and you put it to rest. And that's how, and this is so important, and that's how you make sure that what you own never owns you. And you know what else happens? And this is so important. It sets you up as a person that God can trust with more prestige and more power and more possessions because you are a trustworthy steward who has never made the mistake of thinking that you are an owner. Because everything in the heavens and earth, as David would tell us later, everything in the heavens and earth, everything in the heavens and earth belongs to God and is given to us for a short period of time. So, let's just kill it. Let's just kill it. Let's just kill it. Let's say it out loud in those moments. No pride, no pride, no pride. I'm not going to get all bowed up. I'm no pride. Because anything I have has been given to me. I am a king, perhaps in the eyes of some, but I am not the king of kings. No pride. I'm killing it. And thank you so much for joining us today on Your Move. Did you know if you go to the website at the bottom of your screen, you can download our free app where you can see all of our Your Move content for free forever. And the app is the easiest way to share this content with a friend. Again, thank you for joining us. We'll see you right back here next week for the conclusion of Killing It.
Also, our website is a great place to watch, download, and share the message you saw today from our series, Killing It. Be sure to tune in next week to watch Your Move with Andy Stanley. The preceding program is brought to you by Your Move with Andy Stanley.